Welcome back. You're watching The Money Show. And like I told you at the start of the program, not only do we help you earn money, invest that money, we also help you to figure out the best way to spend the money that you've worked so hard to earn. On this segment, which is a new addition, we talk to you about places that you can travel to, tips and tricks that you can follow. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about Iceland. Let me introduce my next guest. We've got Kritika Goel, who's a travel blogger who's joining in. Thank you so much, Kritika, for taking the time. I really am excited because I spoke to you about this and I said, which would be that one destination that you think is something to consider definitely in the context that we are in right now? And you said Iceland. Why is that?
Okay, so firstly, thank you so much for having me today, Alex. And I think Iceland is hands down one of the most magical and dreamy countries I've been to. The landscape there is unreal. It's nothing like I've ever seen before. It feels like you're on a completely different planet altogether. So I think it's an incredible experience just traveling in that country. And also, it is one of the countries which is allowing Indians, vaccinated Indians, to visit. So I think it's a perfect destination to go to right now.
Okay, so it's one of the places that allows Indians, and you know, on that note, there are several controversies in several other places with regard to the Indian vaccination policy, right? But let's not get into that today. Let's talk about Iceland because that really is setting my imagination afire. Let's talk about how to get there. Is there a budget way to travel? What are the expenses like, Kritika?
Okay, so if I'm being honest, Iceland is one of the most expensive countries in the world. But having said that, I think it is possible to do a budget-friendly trip, or you can just go all out. So the trip I did, this was 3 years ago, so it's been a while, but it was definitely on the more luxurious end of the spectrum. So maybe I'll give you like a breakdown of what my budget was like, but also I will share some tips on how you can make this more budget-friendly as well. So I had done a trip for 2 weeks, and just to give you a breakdown of my budget, so my flight tickets for a round trip from Chennai to Reykjavik and back were for 95,000 rupees. Now this is very subjective. I obviously, because of the pandemic and stuff, now the flight tickets, I don't know if they're more expensive or not, but this is how much they were for us. Then the tour that I booked was through a company called Nordic Visitor. You can plan the trip on your own and make arrangements yourself. But because how expensive Iceland is, we just felt that it's easier if we had someone else make the arrangements and sort out everything for us. So that came up to about 1.25 lakhs per person. Again, we went during the peak tourist season, so things were more expensive then. We also ended up doing like a few additional days in Reykjavik, and we ended up doing a few extra tours as well. One was to like a day trip to Landmannalaugar, which is in central Iceland. We did a Blue Lagoon VIP tour. So like I said, this is a bit more of a luxurious trip. So that came up to like 80,000 per person. And then of course, there are all these other expenses like food, gas for the car, insurance, getting a SIM card, internet, all of that. So that came up to around 50,000. So overall, this was for around 350,000 per person, if I remember right. So that's how much I had spent.
Okay. Now, you have said a few of these names, Kritika, of the places that you visited in Iceland without even batting an eyelid. How long did it take for you to familiarize yourself with the language?
So the language, everyone there understands English, so it's not a problem. But the names there are very confusing and quite like a tongue twister. So definitely, I feel like even now I'm probably pronouncing a lot of names wrong. So don't hold that against me. But yeah, the names there are very confusing, like Landmannalaugar and Reynisfjara, and yeah, very complicated names.
Well, I wouldn't know the difference, so I'm going to have to trust you entirely. Um, you mentioned a few things already, okay? But what stood out to you? And I'm sure our viewers can take a look at the screen, and the visuals that you've shared with us of that place are truly spectacular. But talk to us about the experience and specific things that stood out to you. What can't you miss when you go to Iceland?
Okay, so this is honestly the hardest question because there's so many things to see in Iceland and everything is just so incredible. but I'll give you like a list of few things. So firstly, Blue Lagoon, it's a geothermal spa, and I think it's one of the coolest spas I've been to. That is an incredible experience, and it's right in an hour away from Reykjavik, the capital city. So that's definitely like a must do. Second, Iceland is the land of waterfalls. So there are tons of waterfalls. I believe there are over 10,000 waterfalls, if I'm correct. But of course, like the more famous ones are Godafoss, Seljalandsfoss, Skogafoss, Gullfoss, Dettifoss. Again, complicated names of a few of these. So definitely do as many waterfalls as you can. Third, there's this place called geyser. It's basically this natural phenomenon where every 8 to 10 minutes, there's this huge eruption of steam that glows. I mean, from the earth, and it's just something so hard to imagine that something like this could even exist. So that is definitely worth checking out. Next, I would say Reynisfjara Beach. It's a black sand beach. And the cool thing about this place is that the only land under this is Antarctica. So that's a lot of uninterrupted wind coming this beach's way. So that's cool to visit. Then there's Diamond Beach and Jökulsárlón Glacier Lagoon. So Diamond Beach is basically also a black sand beach, but it has these ice crystals which look like diamond. I've clubbed this together because they're both like right next to each other. And lastly, I would say Landmannalaugar, which I've mentioned before. A lot of tourists, I think, skip this, but this is the central highlands of Iceland and definitely worth visiting. It also has an active volcano, Mount Hekla. So if it hasn't erupted in a while, but yeah, that's definitely worth checking out as well.
Okay.
Remember the exact time of the journey, but basically we took a flight from Chennai to Frankfurt, and then Frankfurt to Reykjavik was like a couple of hours, I think. So probably around, I actually don't remember the exact time duration. But yeah, Iceland has amazing roads. The best way to travel across the country is by renting a car. So we hired like a Toyota Land Cruiser, I think, if I'm right, and we just drove around the entire like circumference of the country.
Okay. What did you find out about the history of Iceland? Did you do any Vikinging? Is that what you call it? Anything that the Vikings used to do?
Like, yeah, so I mean, I think a lot of the places there are sort of linked to the Nordic mythology. So, in fact, this one canyon we went to, the story is that I think Odin, the Norse god's horse, sort of stepped his foot there, and that's why that canyon is in the shape of a horse's foot. So stuff like that. Even within Reykjavik, the capital city, like the streets are called Thor Street, Loki Street, stuff like that. So that was really cool. And I think another interesting thing that I liked about, I mean, not liked particularly, but I thought that was unique about that country is because their population is so small. It's only like 3.5 lakh people. Somehow everyone is like related to each other, and it's also a very safe country. One really weird and unique thing that I saw was that people would literally leave their babies in like the baby trolleys outside cafes and stuff, and then just go and do their own thing. And that, I mean, that's something you can't imagine happening anywhere in the world. So it's a super safe country.
Yeah, very true. Okay. The other thing that I want to ask you, of course, is the food. That's something maybe I should have asked you a little while back. But what's the food like in Iceland?
So I am actually vegetarian. So as a vegetarian, I mean, there's no vegetarian food there as such. So the only thing you get is maybe tomatoes are like grown there. So you get some tomatoes, you get cheese, bread. There is a lot of vegan food that's available. So there are vegan cafes, but food there is so expensive. But coming to like the local food, they eat things like shark meat and stuff. So if you're non-vegetarian, that's something you could try out. That's like a delicacy over there. And of course, beer is very famous in Iceland.
Okay. You painted a beautiful picture for us, Kritika. And I certainly have to put Iceland on my places to visit. Thank you so much for taking the time, and the visuals that you shared with us are truly spectacular. Thanks so much once again.
Thank you so much.